Hey guys, in this Master the Theory lesson I want to talk about the CAGED system and how it actually applies to the fingerboard. Now you may have heard this been mentioned in magazines and online and all this sort of thing. I first came across it after I'd been playing for about 10 years, and what I had done when playing scales before that is I would take 3-note per string patterns and play them in 7 positions up and down the neck. And I do that for different scales, different modes, all that type of thing. So I spent a lot of time kind of going up and down and treading over the same ground essentially. What I got was a book called Fretboard Logic, and in that book it started to talk about something called the CAGED system. And really it's a way of visualizing where to play things on the guitar neck. The guitar neck is, especially with a fretted instrument like the guitar, it's like a big array of places that you can play. Now, unlike the piano or other, which is kind of laid out logically, it's tricky to see where to play a note in the guitar, because you can play the same note in so many different places. So that's why it's hard to read music and everything on the guitar. But the CAGED system is a way of trying to organise that. So no matter where you are on the fingerboard, ultimately you can play a relevant chord, scale or arpeggio, wherever you are on the fingerboard. And that's the kind of important thing about it. It's not just restricted to playing scalar ideas that maybe the 3-note per string kind of way of doing things kind of is locked in. I mean, the 3-note per string, don't get me wrong, I mean, I still use that in my playing. It's a very important facet to have in your playing if you're wanting to use legato lines and other type of playing, alternate picking, all that type of stuff. It has its place. But the CAGED system for me really opened my eyes to really understanding the fingerboard, but also really enhancing the link between the music that you're trying to play and playing it in the guitar. Because really this is just a tool. It doesn't matter if it's a saxophone or a cello or whatever. They're just instruments for creating music on. So if you can get over the kind of the limitation or the physical nature of trying to get the music through the tool that you're using, all the better. And I found that the CAGED system really did nail that for me. Now really it's traditionally taught about basing around chord shapes, but I view it in a slightly different manner. The way I think about it is more about root note locations. Now if you don't know what a root note is, really it's the naming note for a chord or an arpeggio or a scale. So if I'm playing A minor, A is the root note. But traditionally it's called the CAGED system because it's based on the 5 open chords C, A, G, E, and D. Okay. Now the reason why that is, if we take the E form first, or the E should I say. Now you may know how to play bar chords. Really what you're doing with bar chords is you're taking this shape, it's like an E shape, and then you're almost as if your first finger's acting as the nut. So if I was going to play a G, I could play it like a bar form like this. But you can see that the shape of that is still the same as that open E. But what I'm doing is I've moved it so this first finger is now playing a G on the E string here. I also have a G there, and I have a G there. So this is the kind of reference point. This E shape, I'm looking for this kind of root note on these strings, or primarily actually the E string. So if I wanted to play a B, I look for B and then play that shape. And bar chords are kind of, in a nutshell, what the CAGED system's all about. I know to play that there because I'm looking for that root note. And this is a root note that comes from this E-shaped chord. You have the same with the A. Now the root notes in that are on the open A string. And there's one there as well, on the 2nd fret of that G string. So if I wanted to play like a C sharp chord, I could play it like this. I take this shape, I find C sharp and then play the chord. Okay, so traditionally the CAGED system is based around all these kind of chord shapes. What I like to do is strip it down right to the root notes. So when I'm thinking what's known as the E shape, I'm looking for a root note in the E string, but I also see that root note there and that root note there. So when I move that shape about, I mean, you don't tend to play it, but you want to visualize it in the fingerboard. It kind of looks like that. To me, that's what the E shape is. So I'm playing a G here. These are all Gs. So at this location, I know how to play particular scales. I've got arpeggios. Plus I've got chords. And they're all orientated around these Gs here, in this E form. So to me, that's what the E form looks like. And some of you may be familiar with playing a pentatonic minor. Some people call it position 1. But really, that's when you're playing your pentatonic minor from the E string here. But that to me is an E shape scale form. The A shape, as I said, you've got that root note in the A string and then there. So what you have is this little octave shape to orientate yourself with. So say the root note was E. You've got E there and there. And from here, once again, I can play a particular scale. I could play an arpeggio. Or I could play chord. You know, and that's because I'm orientated around these kind of points here, these root note points. So that's your E and A forms, and the reason why I picked those ones first is because most of you will probably be familiar with the notes in the E and A strings and these kind of bar chord shapes. Now the other ones, I'll start with the C shape. So if I'm playing an open C chord, the root notes in that chord are on this A string and then this B string here. So you have that kind of shape. So if my root note was E again, I'd be playing up here. But once again, if I'm starting from here, I could play a particular scale. I've got arpeggios. Plus, I've got chords. All the same again, and that's because I'm orientating myself around these root notes here in this kind of C form. Next one I'll take is the G form. Now if I'm playing an open G chord, looks like that, but the root notes in this chord are on those E strings there and the open G string. So this is hard to play, but as I said, it's all about visualizing at the fingerboard. So if I was going to pick a root note of B this time, say, that's B there, there's a B there, and there's a B there. Okay, once again from here, I can play a pentatonic minor scale. I've got an arpeggio. And a little bit more awkward, I suppose, but you do have chords here as well. Okay, so that's your kind of G form shape there. And the last one's the D form. So an open D chord looks like this. And what I have is a root note here in the D string, and a root note here in that B string. So if that shape, when you move it about, looks like this, you know, maybe familiar to you, it's another octave shape. I mean, essentially this is what we're playing octaves. So if I was playing G's, my root note, it would be there. Once again, I can play a pentatonic minor scale. Yeah. Arpeggio is a little bit trickier in the D form, but you could, you know, you could go for it. Yeah, it's a little D form arpeggio. Or chords as well. I mean, that's like a little minor 7 chord. But once again, it's because I'm orientating myself around these kind of root notes. Now that's basically the way I view it. I see these kind of root notes all over the fingerboard. I'm familiar with all the notes in the fingerboard. That's one of the catches, I suppose. You really need to know your notes in the fingerboards. And of course, I've got lessons in the website that will help you kind of learn that. But even if you just know the notes in the E strings, you can extrapolate from there and kind of, you know, work out, get your kind of shapes hanging off the E and A strings. But the interesting thing, if I was to take, let's take a root note of D, okay? If I start with the C form, it'd be here. So my root note's there. So that's that's how I'd get orientated. You know, I could play root notes there. Notice that that is linked to the A form, like that. And then my third finger hooks into the G form, like that. And that is connected to the E form, which is connected to the D form. So it spells the word caged along the neck there, and then of course I start all over again, that's the C shape there. So you can see they're all linked along the fingerboards. What this means is it allows you to break out of thinking purely vertically when you're playing, if you're playing scales. You can see things along the neck. And what I did there is I just played pentatonic minor, but I was moving through each of those cage shapes along the neck there. And that's the kind of one of the great things that allows you to do it. It really opens up the fingerboard. So no matter where you are on the fingerboard, you can see the relevant notes to play the scale or play the chord or play an arpeggio, whatever. Okay. Now, the one thing I will say to watch out for, make sure you know what your root note is and the shape. Because this, I mean, in the magazines you sometimes see them refer to the pentatonic minor box shapes as position 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Really they're still talking about the cage system. What they've done is just avoided using, calling the E shape or the A shape or the C shape, whatever, just so it doesn't confuse with your root note. So always make sure you know what your root note is and in the shape that you're going to use. For example, if I'm playing a root note of G, but I'm going to use the D form, you know, take this D form, and handily enough, it's the root note. Best way to think about it is on the D string. That's my G there. So I'm not playing the G form of D, I'm playing the D form of G, if that makes sense. And this is an interesting thing. All of them, apart from the C form, because there is no C string, have a root note on the relevant string. So what I mean by that is if it's the E shape, there's root notes in the E strings. There's also one in the D string, but that can help just differentiate between the different shapes when you're learning them. So the E shape has got root notes in the E string. The A shape has a root note in the A string, as well as one in the G string. The G form has one in the G string. Also has root notes in the E string. The D form has a root note in the D string, and that B string there. And the C form says the one that there is no C string, so really, you know, you just have to kind of be familiar seeing it on the A string, say, and then off the B string. Okay, so this is just a kind of quick overview of the way I view the kind of cage system. The basic concept is, is organising this information in the fingerboard. How you apply it, we'll be looking for in all the kind of future lessons in the website, looking at different scales and arpeggios and that sort of thing. But the basic concept itself is it's good just to take that separately, just to get familiar with it. Now, in the handout, as usual, I've got some supporting text and diagrams, and there's also some exercises there to work on. Really, the first step, I suppose, is visualising the shapes in the fingerboard. So what you want to be able to do is, for a root note, pick a root note B, being able to play or visualise each of the cage shapes on the fingerboard. You can see that one of the side effects of this, if you've not looked at the other lessons for learning the notes in the fingerboard, is you end up learning where the notes are in other strings using, you know, maybe the E and the A strings. So, you know, for example, if I was going to pick root note of F sharp, why not? I see those F sharps there in the E form. I've got that one in the D form, that one in the C form, you know. Now, I'm doing this sequentially, but what you have to watch out for learning shapes relative to that one. So what I mean is I'm chaining these together. But ideally what you want to do is see if you can break that up. So I've got F sharp here and here, I've got it here, you know, I've got it here, yeah, I've got it here. Because if you fall into that, it's not really a trap, but you may end up just knowing a shape by working it out from an existing shape, so you have to kind of go to work it out. And really in the further down the line, you want to be able to just instantly go to a shape without having to kind of almost like climb up the ladder. It's kind of the same when you're learning notes in the fingerboard. You end up, to begin with, you kind of climb up the ladder to get the note, but then after a while you just know where the notes are. So it's the same kind of principle. And with usual this type of stuff, the more you do it, repetition and repetition, the more familiar it gets. Okay, so be sure to check out the handout and have a go at those exercises and see if you can get a good handle on visualizing the shapes. Even being able to draw them down is a good way to test yourself to see if you know the shapes.